What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds DFS, and in today's video we're going to do another first look at the PrizePicks NBA board for February 23rd. It's a little after 11:30 a.m. here on the East Coast. So if you're watching this video for the first time, just keep in mind that the projections you see in the video will probably change throughout the day as they typically do. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we focus on all things single-player daily fantasy sports. So that includes sites like PrizePicks, some Monkey Knife Fight, some Thrive Fantasy down the road, and the others that are on the way up. I believe that single-player daily fantasy sports is the future of DFS, and I'm getting in early before this thing blows up. So if this is your first time here, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications as I release videos every single day, and I don't want you to miss any of my great content. Hit the like button for me if you're feeling this video. Drop a comment below and definitely share as we continue to grow. It would be awesome if we could hit 600 subscribers by the end of this month. We got a few days left to do it. Just under a week remains in February. So let's see if we can get it done, guys. I need your support. And I appreciate all the support that you've given up to this point. Now, with that out of the way, it's time to talk some injury news. We've got a 9-game slate tonight, so pretty chunky slate of NBA games to talk about. And we'll start at the very top here with Kristaps Porzingis, Dallas Mavericks. He is questionable with lower back tightness. Now, there's also a rumor floating around that Kristaps Porzingis' name was being dangled in potential trade talks. That the Dallas Mavericks were gauging the trade value of Kristaps Porzingis, so kind of interesting there. Russell Westbrook, who played in a overtime game last night, logged very big minutes. He's questionable, might be rested on a back-to-back, so we may not see him versus the Clippers tonight. Andre Drummond continues to be a team choice bench, a healthy scratch, if you will, until they can find a trade partner who will take on Andre Drummond. Kevin Durant, Brooklyn Nets, out with a hamstring. He's out indefinitely. Kyle Lowry, Toronto Raptors, questionable with a left thumb sprain. Drew Holiday, Milwaukee Bucks, is out due to COVID protocol. Stephen Curry is out with an illness. Let me take that back. He's questionable with an illness. He missed the last game. There's a chance that he does play tonight, though. So Harrison Barnes, questionable with a left foot strain. DeLon Wright is out indefinitely with a groin injury. Blake Griffin out due to the team's choice. This is another situation where Blake Griffin may be traded eventually. Paul Millsap is out with a knee injury. Kevin Looney, questionable with an ankle. He might return today. James Wiseman is questionable with a wrist. He also might be back. JaMychal Green continues to be out for the Denver Nuggets. Jeff Green is questionable for the Brooklyn Nets with a shoulder sprain. And finally, Maxi Kleber, he left last night's game early with a left ankle sprain. So those are the most impactful, biggest news stories to keep an eye on as we start to break down today's NBA slate. Now, starting things off here, we've got a very enticing matchup here. Trae Young versus this Cleveland Cavaliers backcourt of Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. Now, if you've been paying attention, the Cleveland Cavaliers backcourt is a backcourt that we typically like to attack, that we like to target in situations like these. So let's take a look at Trae Young, as he is the highest projected Atlanta Hawk on this board. We'll head on over to Roto Grinders. We've got it preloaded with our FanDuel projections already. FanDuel, they do the same type of scoring system as PrizePicks, so it makes it an easy comparison for us. Now, if we go over to Trae Young, he is projected at 46.31, which would put him as a slight under versus that 47 on PrizePicks. We're going to get into the game logs here and dig a little deeper on Ice Trae and see if he's going to be stone cold or if he's going to melt on us tonight. Now, his last game was a good one, 64.7, but we're going to start back here at 5 games back, as we typically do. Now, 5 games ago against the Indiana Pacers, 34.2, not very good. 37.6 against the Knicks, also not very good. But since then, he's got a 3-game hot streak going. 53.6 would put him well over tonight's projection of 47. 55.3, another one against Boston where he just balled out. And then he took things to a new level here against the Denver Nuggets, putting up 64.7 in his last game, as we mentioned before. So 3 games in a row where he has soared over 47 fantasy points with ease. Now, going back here, I don't see any recent games of Cleveland and Atlanta, so we could jump ahead and talk minutes where he's projected to play about 36 tonight. Now, here is what stands out to me, and I mentioned this at the top of the show. We like to attack this Cleveland Cavaliers backcourt. Combo guards in particular have done very well against the Cavaliers. The Cavs are allowing 51.43 fantasy points per game to combo guards such as Trae Young, making them the 10th most generous in all the NBA. So this is a very good matchup on paper here, as this average points allowed is more than this projection on both Roto Grinders and on PrizePicks. So there's some wiggle room here, some upward mobility for Trae Young, some upside potential. So I like what I'm seeing there. 2 games and 3 nights for Trae, 34.8 minutes per game, almost 35 minutes on the season. 1.29 fantasy points per minute on average to go along with a usage rating of 34, one of the best usage ratings in all the league, but especially amongst point guards. So very productive player is Trae Young. Now this Cavaliers team's not very good, so there's no surprise here when you talk about the game totals and spread. Cleveland 109.75. They are a 7-point underdog versus this Atlanta Hawks team. So 7-point spread is one that I cannot get behind in terms of feeling good about it staying close and competitive. I think this game could potentially blow out, and I'd probably give this like an orange if I were to put a color on it in terms of blowout potential. Orange being very high in terms of blowout potential here. I do like the total on the Atlanta side of things. So if you want to target some of these Atlanta guys like Trae Young, for instance, who's in a good situation, a good spot, in a plus matchup, well, I think you could do that. Even though he's up at 47, I think there's a little room here for you to take the over on Trae Young. So I'm digging that play. Now, let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers side of things. I know he's wearing a Brooklyn Nets uniform, but Jarrett Allen is the highest Cleveland Cavalier on today's board. He is projected at 39 fantasy points. So Jarrett Allen's been hooping. He's been balling, guys. And just a couple nights ago, I think he was at 37. So now they got him up at 39. So PrizePicks is paying attention. They see what's going on with Jarrett Allen. It's no secret anymore that ever since Andre Drummond has parked his big butt on the bench, that Jarrett Allen has stepped into more minutes and a bigger role for this team. So if we look at his projection here on Roto Grinders, he's at 38.39, which would put him, in the neighborhood of 39, but not quite there. So they like the under on Jarrett Allen. We could get into the game logs and see what he's been up to here. All right, so if we start 5 games back, like we like to do, against Portland, 38.2, which would put him under tonight. 27.5 would put 27.5 would put him under. Then he's got 3 games in a row where he has went over. 39.3 against Golden State, impressive. 43, even more impressive against Denver. 55.4 against Oklahoma City. So he went up and up and up in his last 3 games here. He's playing very, very good basketball. Not only that, but his minutes are also on the rise, going from 29 to 33 to 41. Now, I don't think he's going to hit 41 minutes on every night here or anything like that, but you should expect between 30 and 35, I would say, in most situations. So I'm liking the way that his minutes and his production is trending here. It's all going up. So nice look at Jarrett Allen there in his last 5 games. If we go over to his minutes tonight, he's projected to play 33. So as I mentioned, between 30 and 35, we're right in the neighborhood there. Now he's a post-up big. Kind of working in his favor here is the fact that Atlanta hasn't been very good against post-up bigs like Jarrett Allen. They rank second in terms of most generous, most giving defenses to post-up bigs. They're allowing 34.34 fantasy points per game to post-up bigs. So while this isn't like an advantageous or plus matchup for Allen, this should be one where he does have a good game. He'll be facing off against another long, rangy, athletic big man in Clint Capela. This is a 2 games and 3 night situation for Allen. He's playing 27 minutes per game, 1.17 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 16.73, which, for post-up bigs, guys, in case you didn't know, they don't really have high usage ratings because they're not touching the basketball. Guys like Allen, guys like Gobert, Capela, Enes Kanter, and so on, you're never really going to see a high usage rating for most of those dudes. So just to recap, yes, I do like the game total on the Atlanta side of things. No, I don't like the game total on the Cleveland side of things. No, I don't like the spread here. This game has blowout potential written all over it. I don't think Cleveland's very good. I don't think they'll be able to keep up with this Hawks team. So, there is some risk here in taking Trae Young or some of these higher projected guys like Clint Capela and taking the over. So just be careful. Maybe reserve those guys for first half plays only if you're a little worried about the blowout like I am. All right. Next game, Detroit Pistons versus Orlando Magic. This is a rematch. I believe they just played each other the last time they took the floor. So it's another one of them situations where we've seen a lot of this season where teams are playing each other 2 games in a row here. So we'll start things off with Jeremy Grant, as he is the highest projected Detroit Piston on today's board. And let's head over to RotoGrinders and find Mr. Grant, who has been a model of inconsistency lately. So, earlier, not too long ago, he was projected at like 40. I would say in the last couple of days, he's been around that 40 mark. Well, now he's down to 38. Well, that might not even be low enough yet here for Jeremy Grant. He's projected at 36.49, which would put him under. So we go into the game logs here and head back to his 5th game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could see 27.5 in that one versus Boston. Not very good. Even if we go back to the 6th game here, 24.5. So that would be under. Here's a big game, 45.4. But then he went under again and under again. So, in his last 6 games, guys, he's only went over tonight's projection 1 time. 1 out of his last 6. So very hard to trust Jeremy Grant. Now, in his last game against Orlando, he did log over 34 minutes. And he got to 34 fantasy points, which, is good, but it's not good enough to reach a 38 here. So I don't know. You gotta think, is Jeremy Grant going to come back here? He's going to bounce back in this game? I'm not so sure. So his minutes are set at 36 tonight. He's a versatile forward. This Magic team is allowing 36 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards like Grant, making them the 9th most generous in the league. So he's projected for 36. They're allowing 36. So, maybe 36 is right there in that wheelhouse. This is 2 games and 3 nights for Grant. He's playing over 36 minutes a game this season. His fantasy points per minute are okay. They're passable at 1.05. This is your first time here. Typically, I like to target guys who have a fantasy point per minute average of at least 1 or more. 1 kind of being the gold standard for me. Anything below 1, I'm a little leery about playing that individual. His usage rating is 25.53. Again, putting him in that very good category. Anything 25 to 30 is considered very good for me. Anything 30 or up is just elite, and you're a usage monster. So Jeremy Grant, not too bad in those metrics. Now, heading over to the game totals and spread, Orlando is a 3.5 point favorite at home. 106.5. Detroit, 103. So, no, not loving the game totals here. If you combine the scores, you're looking at 209.5 points. Not very many points going to be scored in this game. And when there's not a lot of points on the board, that typically means there's not a lot of fantasy production. So, less fantasy points, less real-life points, less rebounds, less assists. You got to keep those things in mind when looking at these game totals. When Vegas sets up these totals, these game totals and spreads and stuff, guys, they bake in all that information, injuries, stats, and all that stuff goes right into that number. So using Vegas as a barometer, as a way to measure fantasy production is a very good way to approach things. So in this game, looks like it's going to be a little bit light in terms of any type of fantasy production or single stat stuff. So otherwise, the spread's good. I would give it a green light, but just be careful with targeting anybody from this game, as it doesn't look like it's going to be a whole wealth in terms of fantasy goodness. So Nikola Vujovic, 51 fantasy points. Big number there for Vooch. He has been a guy who we have been, I think, targeting the under on in recent days, but his last game against Detroit, he had a monster performance. Mason Plumlee just didn't have any answers for Nikola Vujovic. Now today, he's projected for 48.11 rather. So they still like the under over on RotoGrinders. Now, let's go back and take a look at the recent game logs here. We look at the last 5, kind of get a better picture of what's been happening with him. So we'll start back here against Sacramento on February 12th. 63.8 monster performance there, but then he dipped all the way down to 33, 43, 2 back-to-back games where he underperformed. But then he has elevated his game in his last 2, a 70 burger for Nikola Vujovic and 63.9 against this Detroit Pistons team in his last meeting. So 2 very good back-to-back games here. So I can understand being hesitant on taking the under on Nikola Vujovic as he is having an all-star year. He should be in the all-star game. If he's not, I'm going to be a very sad boy. Now, his minutes tonight are set at 35. Good minute number. He's a versatile big. This Pistons team ranks just 11th in the league against versatile bigs. They're allowing over 33 fantasy points per game. So while this average isn't more than what he's projected on Roto Grinders or PrizePicks, it's still a pretty good number, and this team is not one to be feared in terms of matchup, as you can tell from Vujovic's last game against this Pistons team. So this is a 2 games in 3 nights situation for Vuj, playing 33.8 minutes per game, 1.39 fantasy points per minute, to go along with a usage rating of 28.37. 2 of the better numbers here amongst centers, so very productive player. So just to recap for this game, spread is a green light for me. It's going to stay close and competitive, although there's not a lot of points up on the board, which means less fantasy points and less single stat stuff. So probably wouldn't target any overs in this game in terms of like single stat or maybe even fantasy points. It might be difficult for these guys to get there. So moving right along, we've got another game to discuss here. The Sacramento Kings taking on the Brooklyn Nets once again. These 2 teams just faced off maybe about a week to a week and a half ago, and they're going to be meeting each other again tonight. No Kevin Durant for this one, as we already talked about in the injury section of this video. But we'll start things off with the Sacramento side with Deiron Fox, who's kind of been on the struggle bus lately. He's looking to hopefully jump off the struggle bus and get onto the success bus. And hopefully he's successful tonight, especially if you're going to take him and take the over. Now, looking at his projections on Roto Grinders, they've got him at 42.3, which would put him slightly over this 41. I believe he can do it. I believe that he's talented enough to get there. Now, look at his last 5 games here. Like I said, he has been struggling. If we go back to game 5 here against Memphis, 43.9 would be enough for him to go over, but then 37.6, 29.8, 39.1, and 31.2. He's got 4 games in a row where he has not sniffed 40 or more fantasy points. And one of those games was against Brooklyn back on February 15th. He put up 37.6 fantasy points. So although that was a pretty good game for him, it was not good enough to get up to the number that we would need him to get to if we take the over on him tonight. So a little worried about that there. Now, this game, he is projected to play 36 minutes. He is a combo guard. Combo guards against this Brooklyn Nets team. This is a positive or plus matchup for Deiron Fox. So they allow over 44 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Fox. And if that's true, then he should be in a plus matchup here. This should be a good situation for him, as this average exceeds what he's projected to score on both Roto Grinders and on PrizePicks. Now, this is 3 games and 4 nights for Fox, so he's been playing a lot of basketball lately. 33.3 minutes per game to go along with 1.17 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of 30.96, almost 31. Good usage, good fantasy points per minute numbers. Now, if we look at the game totals here, this is what gets me excited about this game. Brooklyn, 124.25. They have a massive, massive total at home against this Sacramento team, 117.75. No, I can't give it a green light in terms of spread. I do give it a green light in terms of total, though, as this easily tops that 230-point mark for me. Love to see that in terms of fantasy upside, fantasy potential. It's oozing with fantasy potential here, so loving that. I'm just a little worried about the spread here, and blowouts, you know, they are the bane of our existence here on PrizePicks, especially when we target the overs on a lot of these guys. So keep that in mind. Loving the way that things are shaping up here, though, in terms of some fantasy juiciness here. Now, James Harden is the next guy we're going to talk about. I'll mention it again. No Kevin Durant. So James Harden's fantasy score is up at 58 tonight. Big number for James Harden, but he is a monster. And if anybody can get it done, it's going to be him. Now, his projection over on Roto-Grinders is a bit less at 56.77, even if we were feeling giving and generous and we wanted to round this up to 57, that would still put him under his projection on PrizePicks. So if we get into the game logs here, loading, and we go back to his fifth game, that was against Golden State. He put up 59.6, which would be enough just barely to get him over this 58. So there's an over there, a 61.6 over, 63.9 over. He did fall short here against the Lakers at 53.5, and then 63.7 here against the Clippers. So in his last 5 games, he has went over 4 out of 5. I'm loving his chances tonight of going over. And then we look at this previous game log against Sacramento, where he played over 34 minutes and ended up with 61.6 fantasy points. So even more reason to like James Harden in this matchup. Now, we got to jump ahead here and talk about his minutes, where he's expected to play about 57. He is a combo guard. This Sacramento Kings team is allowing 52.41 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So, although the average isn't higher than what he's projected to score tonight, it's still a situation where he's going to put up a lot of points. And, you know, if this number was not considering like James Harden, for example, if it was just some random no-name combo guard that we were talking about here, we would be like, wow, 52 is pretty good. But this is James Harden, one of the most talented, if not the most talented combo guards in the entire league. So the fact that he's at 52, or the projections at 52, the average is at 52, is a good thing for James Harden. I think there's plenty of upside here for him. 2 games in 3 nights, playing almost 38 minutes per game, 1.37 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 28.64. Of course, those fantasy points per minute and that usage rating are on the rise with Kevin Durant being out for the last few games and really just out indefinitely. So I expect those numbers to continue to go up in tonight's matchup and going forward as long as Durant is not around. So just to recap, loving the game totals here from really both sides, but especially this Brooklyn Nets side. I give that a super big thumbs up, green light for me. Although I don't like the spread is somewhat worrisome. I got to put this in the orange, maybe even creeping into red category for me. I think that there's a good likelihood here that this game does blow out. I just hope that it stays close long enough for us to get some minutes from the starters into the fourth quarter. James Harden is notorious for playing big minutes. He has one of the best minutes per game averages in all the league, especially amongst like big name stars. So loving that game there. That's a good one to target. Now let's move along here and talk the Golden State Warriors versus the New York Knicks. We got Steph Curry on the board, who I think was questionable at the top of the show when we looked at the injury news. And it's not that he's physically injured. Apparently, just before tip-off of the last game against the Charlotte Hornets, Curry was ruled out last minute. He was like a last-minute scratch. Apparently, he wasn't feeling good. He was dealing with some sort of bug. But hopefully he's good to go tonight, as Steph Curry in Madison Square Garden is always a sight to behold. So let's head over to Roto-Grinders. We'll filter out all positions just looking at point guard here. And my oh my, they've got Steph Curry way low. And that might be because he was sick, or that might be because he's questionable to play tonight. But 43.58 against this Knicks team doesn't seem like a situation where, you know, this projection seems completely accurate. But let's get into the game logs real quick, and we could dig in a little further. All right, so he missed his last game here. So we're going to go back to February 11th versus this Orlando Magic team. 63.1, monster game there. Now he came back down to earth here at 34.1, 46.4, 52.9, and a 52.9. So in his last 5 games, guys, he has went over tonight's projection 1, 2, 3 times. So the 51 mark is definitely one that we know he can hit. He is fully capable. And we go back and we don't see any game logs against the New York Knicks, so we can jump ahead and talk about his minutes. They got him playing 34 minutes. He is a combo guard. This Knicks team is pretty darn generous when it comes to allowing fantasy points to combo guards. They're allowing, we'll call it 49 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Curry. So you mix in the fact that this is Steph Curry we're talking about with a high average allowed by the New York Knicks. I'm loving this matchup. Should be a positive plus matchup. Now, as long as Curry plays and he's feeling good, he should be well rested, being that he sat out last game. He's playing 34.1 minutes per game, 1.36 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 32.88. So, loving what I'm seeing there from Steph. A fantastic fantasy performer. Now, looking at the game totals and spread here, they're a little light in terms of totals. The spread is good. I'm going to give it a green light go for me, as the spread is just 3 points, so it should stay close and competitive. Golden State, 111.5 points. Pretty decent total. Not one that I'm getting overly excited about, but this matchup is one that I really like. I think Steph Curry, again, provided he is 100%, has a real shot of going for 51 or more fantasy points. So, liking what I'm seeing in terms of the way that this matchup is setting up for Curry. Now, the next guy on the board is Julius Randle. The PrizePicks website is doing what it does, so we're going to not click on Julius Randle's name, but we're going to talk about him. We are going to talk about him. His projection's at 42.31. Now, recently on PrizePicks, he has been projected right around 44 on most nights. So let's dig into his recent game logs. Maybe he's been playing a little bit worse, and that's why his projections are down. But if we go back to the 5th game here in his game log, he faced the Washington Wizards and put up a 50-burger, 50.6. Then he dropped down a bit to 37.8, 59.3, went way back up, dropped down again, 32.9, and then a 43.8. So in his last 5 games, based on tonight's projections, he has went over 1, 2, 3 times. But if we go back a little further here, you'll notice a little bit of a pattern starting back on February 7th. Big game, bad game. Big game, bad game. Big game, bad game. And we'll call that a semi-big game. It was enough for him to go over tonight. So he's been a little bit of hit or miss. He's a guy that I would probably fade because you just don't know what you're going to get out of him lately. But we'll go a little further here and talk about his minutes, where he is set at 36 minutes tonight. He's a versatile big. Golden State with the likes of Draymond Green, and they might be getting Wiseman back and Looney back. They got some big bodies to throw at Julius Randle, and I think Draymond will do a pretty good job if he does end up matching up with Julius Randle here. But Golden State, they're allowing 33.82 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. So I do expect Randle to have a pretty good game, but it may be difficult for him tonight. This is 2 games and 3 nights for him, playing almost 37 minutes per game. Pretty big minute average. 1.2 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of nearly 27. So good usage rating for a power forward and really for a center of any, or power forward or center of any kind. So loving what I'm seeing there for Randle this season, having a great year. So just to recap, guys, the game total, not my favorite. The spread, it's good. You can go ahead and play players from this game. Just don't expect a monster night from really anybody on either side. You know, a guy like Steph Curry, of course, he can defy logic and he can do whatever the heck he wants on any given night. So if you're liking the Steph Curry play, by all means, definitely play him. Now I'm going to reload the website here because obviously they're back there changing projections or something like that. So, yeah, they're doing their job. But moving ahead here, we got the Philadelphia 76ers against the Toronto Raptors. This game tips off at 7:40 p.m. over on PrizePicks. We got to talk my favorite in terms of MVP candidates, Joel Embiid, leading this Philadelphia 76ers squad to a fantastic record this season. He is playing high-level basketball at the moment. So on RotoGrinders, they've got Joel Embiid projected for 53.86, which would put him over tonight's projection of 52. I don't mind going over on Joel Embiid most nights. Let's look at the game logs and see what he's been up to. So going back to his fifth game on the game log against Portland, 53.3, which would put him just barely over this 52. Liking what I'm seeing there. Then he would have went under here at 48.6. He missed this game against Utah. Now he's got 3 straight games where he's just been balling out. 60.7, 93.9 fantasy points. Oh my God. 52.4. So he's went over this 52 number in his last 5 games 4 out of 5 times. Very high success rate in terms of going over 52 in recent games. Now, this game against Toronto tonight is a rematch, a second half and a back-to-back versus the Raptors. Now, in the last game against Toronto, he did put up 52.4 fantasy points, which would be just enough to squeak him over the top if you're taking the over on Joel Embiid. Positive and encouraging sign there. Now, his minutes are set at 35, according to our friends at RotoGrinders. He is a versatile big. Now, the Raptors, they rank pretty well against versatile bigs, limiting them to just 28.78 fantasy points per game. So, not the most favorable or plus matchup for Embiid. But as you can see from his last game, he was able to get there. And this dude's one of the best in the league at his position. So I'm not really worried about any matchup here. And you shouldn't be either. So this is a 2 games in 3 night situation for Embiid. He's playing almost 33 minutes per game. Got to love that total. And his fantasy points per minute are 1.63. The best amongst centers and one of the best in the entire league. He is a monster, guys. And you put that 1.63 fantasy points per minute along with a usage rating of 33.46, and you've got all the makings for a beast in the fantasy world. Love to see that. Now, looking at the game totals and spread here, spread is green for me. It is a green light go. This game looks to be a competitive one. Looks like it's going to stay close. Not worried about either team blowing the other out, according to our Vegas odds makers. Now, Toronto, 110.25. They are a 1.5 point underdog at home here. So Philadelphia is expected to score 111.75. So in terms of totals, this one's going to top the 222 point mark for me, but it's not terrible, but, it could always be worse. I wish it was up there around 225, 230, but hey, I'll take what I can get here. This one should be a good one. Pascal Siakam projected at 40. Fred VanVleet projected at 40. Let's talk VanVleet because, earlier in the season, this dude was absolutely on fire, and no Kyle Lowry potentially tonight with a thumb injury, so can Fred VanVleet step into a larger role here tonight? Let's see what happens. His projection's at 38.17, which would put him under his projection of 40. So we need VanVleet to recapture that magic. He is he's a big time scorer when he is hitting his shots and things are working out for him. But I don't know that that's been the case lately. Let's look at his game logs real quick. I'm curious. All right. So in his last 5 games here, 33.6 against the Minnesota T-Wolves, not good enough. 50.3 would put him well over tonight's projection of 40, liking that one. Came really close here against Milwaukee in the second half of a rematch versus them. He put up 39 fantasy points. 34.9 against Minnesota would not be good enough. Now, in his last game against Philly, he did play well, 48.5 fantasy points. So I'm liking that in terms of potential here for Fred VanVleet tonight. Now, his minutes are set at 36. He is a combo guard. Here's what's working in Fred VanVleet's favor. The fact that the 76ers are the 6th most generous to combo guards in all the NBA, and they're allowing this big number here, 52.71 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So you look at what they've allowed on average to combo guards, and then you look at the projection for Fred VanVleet on RotoGrinders, who has him at 38, and even on PrizePicks, who has him at 40, and you can see that there is a high ceiling here for Fred VanVleet to go over 40 fantasy points. And he did go over, as we mentioned, against Philadelphia in their last game. So I am liking this setup here for Fred VanVleet. This is 2 games in 3 nights. He's playing over 36 minutes a night. He should have, plenty of run. 1.11 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 24.58. I believe that his usage and fantasy points per minute will go up, especially without Kyle Lowry in the lineup. So if Lowry's out, I'm really digging Fred VanVleet over. and I think you should be too. It's worth considering, guys. So to recap, yeah, this game total is pretty good. Not the best, but the spread for me is a green light go. It is a good situation here. It should stay competitive. All of the big names in this game, Embiid, Siakam, Simmons, Van Vliet, Tobias Harris, all of those guys have a good shot of playing big minutes, and taking the over could be a way to go. So do not mind targeting this game whatsoever. Now in the next game, we've got the Boston Celtics taking on the Dallas Mavericks. We've got Jason Tatum up here at 45, looking like a strong projection for him. This game tips off at 7:40 p.m. Let's take a look at Jason Tatum and see what his projections have looked like recently. Well, first, they've got it dialed in at 45 here on RotoGrinders. So RotoGrinders, PrizePicks, they seem to be on the same wavelength here on Jason Tatum. They've got him at 45. Let's look at his recent game logs now. Going back 5 games ago, I mean, this one was bad, but he only played 23 minutes in this one. He put up 22.6 fantasy points, way under tonight's projection. 39.2, pretty sizable under there as well. 54.2 would have been great for an over. 49.6 over, and 50.8 over. So his last 3 games, guys, he has been balling out. He's went over in 3 in a row. Overall, in his last 5, he has went over in 3 out of 5, but he's playing much better basketball in his last 3 games, shooting the basketball a whole lot more, and pretty good field goal percentages too, 42%, 48%, 52%. So looking back here against this Dallas team, I don't have a game log to discuss, so let's jump to minutes, where he's playing 37 minutes tonight according to RotoGrinders. He is a versatile forward. The Mavericks rank 21st in terms of being the most stingiest or least giving to versatile forwards like Tatum in terms of fantasy points per game. They're allowing 31.79 fantasy points per game, so it looks like a tough matchup on paper for him. His rest situation, 2 games and 3 nights, 35.5 minutes per game played this season, 1.25 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 30.72. Now, if we jump ahead here and talk about the game totals and spread's looking good here. This is a green light in terms of spread. The totals, not bad, but you know, could be a little bit better. I'm not going to be too hard on the game totals here. Dallas 112.5. They are a 1.5 point underdog at home against this Boston Celtics team, who's projected to score 114. So that puts the game totals at 226.5 points. Not terrible at all. So feel good about taking anybody you want from this game in full game formats, first half only, single stat also in play. I'm liking what I'm seeing here. Now, the next guy we got to talk about is Luca Doncic, who's projected at 57. Now, last night, Kristaps Porzingis was ruled out. He was a late scratch, I guess you could call it, and did not end up playing. That didn't bother Luca, though. I mean, the Mavericks ended up whooping the Memphis Grizzlies and dominated for the most part. So let's see what Luca's projected at today. 55.59, which would put him under. Now, how many of you at home who are watching this ever feel good about taking a superstar like Luca Doncic and taking the under? Well, you know, it's hard for me to do that. It's hard for me to feel good about clicking that button, that under button. Let's look at his recent game logs and see what Luca's been doing here. All right, in his 5th game back against Minnesota, 39.1, not good at all. He did bounce back against Atlanta, 59, 76.6 against New Orleans as he faced off against Zion Williamson. Probably got the better of that matchup, I'd say. 60.9 against Portland, and then 41.9 last night against Memphis. Kind of expected him to do a little bit more than he did against Memphis last night, but apparently he really didn't need to have a huge game, as the Mavericks were just the better team all night long. So in his last 5 games, just to recap, he's went over 1, 2, 3 out of 5. Pretty good success rate there. Not terrible. Now against Boston, I don't have a game log to look at, so we can move ahead and talk about minutes, where he's expected to play about 36 minutes tonight. This Boston team, Although their ranking makes it seem like this is a tough matchup for Luca, they are still allowing 46.23 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So, although the average isn't higher than his projection, I do like the fact that we're not just talking any old generic combo guard here. We're talking about Luca Doncic, one of the best combo guards in the entire league. So I do think that this is a good matchup for him. Now, this is a back-to-back. As I mentioned, he played last night. He's playing over 35 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute, 1.53, to go along with a usage rating of 36.29. This kid's a monster. He is very early in his career, but he is already establishing himself as a fantasy monster. So, just to recap on this game, I like the totals. Don't love them, but I like them. I think they're pretty strong here. Love the spread, though. 1.5 points. Should stay close, competitive throughout. And I think the matchup sets up pretty nice for Luca Doncic here. And I don't mind if you feel like taking the over on the 57. We know he can get it done. And there's a good chance that he does tonight. So let's move ahead here and talk the next game. We got the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, we know the Bucks, they've been pretty bad against big guys this season. So we're going to kick things off by talking Karl Anthony Towns, KAT, who is projected at 46 fantasy points. Now, if we go down the line here and we look at Karl Anthony Towns and his projection, he's at 43.12, which puts him a few points under that 46 number on PrizePicks. So let's look at his game logs and see what the big cat's been up to. We'll go back to his 5th game here, which was against the Toronto Raptors, 42.7. Not good enough to go over tonight's projection. 29.2, not even close to be good enough to go over. 53.5, 41.6, and a 60. So in his last 5 games, guys, he's went over just twice out of his last 5. Not a very good success rate. But I did mention this matchup is a good one for him. Playing 32 minutes tonight, according to Roto Grinders. He's a versatile big. Now, on paper, it doesn't look great here, guys. The Milwaukee Bucks ranked 22nd, allowing just 28.45 fantasy points to versatile bigs. But I'm telling you, this Bucks team, they don't guard big guys very well. Who are they going to put in his way? Brook Lopez? Are we really worried about him? Yeah, he's a big body, but he's just an oversized point guard at this stage in his career. He just sits out there, camps the three-point line. I just don't see him slowing Karl Anthony Towns down here. Now, this is a 2 games in 3 nights situation for Towns, playing over 32 minutes, almost 33 minutes per game. 1.42 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 26.14. So, loving the fantasy points per minute for Karl Anthony Towns, and his usage rating, not bad either at 26.14. Pretty good, actually, for a power forward or center, one of the bigger guys. So if we move ahead here and we talk about game totals and spread, this one is probably my first certified red warning, blowout potential here. I mean, blowout is written all over this game. Milwaukee, 121 points. They are an 11-point home favorite against this visiting Minnesota Timberwolves team. So you're talking an 11-point spread. Yeah, this game's going to be a runaway at some point. When will it happen? Well, we don't know, but it's looking very likely that it does. So if you are thinking about taking anybody in this game and taking the over, well, I would warn against that. I would caution that you don't. So maybe going under on Karl Anthony Towns is the right move based on that total and based on that spread. Next guy we're going to discuss is Giannis Attentacumpo, 59 fantasy points. Again, as I just mentioned, this might be another situation where it may be in your best interest to take the under. But let's take a look here. Now, he is projected at 61.12 fantasy points on Roto Grinders. And for good reason. He's been playing very good basketball lately. But if this game blows out and Giannis doesn't get many or any minutes in the fourth quarter, it's going to be hard for him to get to this 61. So if you take the over on his projection on PrizePicks, you just have to hope that the reason this game becomes a blowout, becomes a runaway, is because Giannis Antetokounmpo is just going crazy. But there are some other good players on this team, such as Chris Middleton, who might cut into some productivity for Attentacumpo. So if we go back to his 5th game here against Oklahoma City, He has been on a tear, guys. He has just been playing like MVP caliber basketball for like the last couple of weeks. So 72.4 against OKC, 74 against Toronto, 50.4, 72.8, and 62.6. So it really says something about how good Giannis Attentacumpo has been playing. When you see a 50 in his game log and you're just like, meh, it was okay. It was a good game. It was a decent game. Dude's just been playing out of this world. 60, 70, 70, 70. I mean, he's got 3 70-point performances in his last 5 games. And then he's got a 62-point performance in there too. So he's went over his projection of 59 in 4 out of his last 5, and he's done so in convincing fashion. I mean, even if we go back and we lump in a couple more games here, 68, 65, guys, he's just been crushing this 59. So, I mean, yeah, I'm a little worried about the blowout, but dude has been putting the team on his back lately, especially it seems like since Jrue Holiday's been out. It seems like Giannis has been like just through the roof here. Now, tonight he's going to play about 34 minutes, according to Roto Grinders. He's a versatile forward on paper. This is just on paper, but we're really not worried about anybody slowing Giannis down. On paper, though, Minnesota ranks 27th in terms of how stingy they are, allowing fantasy points per game to versatile forwards like Giannis. Again, this is the Greek freak. Are we really worried? I'm not worried. You shouldn't be. This is a 2 games and 3 night situation here. 33.8 minutes per game. 1.64 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 34.17. It just doesn't get much better than that. It just doesn't. So, to recap, loving the total for the Milwaukee Bucks in this one. Not loving the spread whatsoever. This is a red spread. A red spread means you could end up dead if you take the over on any of these guys. This might be a game that is just best to be faded, or take Giannis Attentacumpo in a first half over maybe. That could be a way to go. Let's move along here. We're almost to the end of the video. You guys have been hanging around here. It's getting a little long-winded. I try not to, but I also try to pack in as much information and value as possible in these videos to help you guys out. So it's a love-hate. It's a two-edged sword. But anyway, Damien Lillard, 52. 52 is the projection for Dame as they take on the Denver Nuggets tonight. Now, his projection against this Nuggets team is 53.09, which would make him a 1-point over favorite. Now, let's look at his game logs. Going back to his 5th game, which is against Dallas, 52.1, 57.4, 73.8, 60.2. He was on a hot streak, and then last night happened. And basically the Phoenix Suns jumped all over this Portland team and did not let their foot off of the throats of the Trailblazers. So Lillard only played 28.57 minutes. They probably pulled him knowing that he was on a back-to-back, knowing that they would need him against another tough opponent tonight against this Denver Nuggets team. So heading back here, I don't have any recent game logs to talk about Damian Lillard, but you can see that overall he's been playing some very good basketball, especially if we throw out last night's crappy game. Now he's been playing, he should be playing 37 minutes tonight. He is a combo guard. Here is what's working out for Dame. The Nuggets are allowing 45.18 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So I think that bodes well for Damian Lillard here, one of the more talented combo guards in the league, right? Now, this is a back-to-back situation, 3 games in 4 nights, so maybe fatigue plays a little factor here. We just don't know. 35.8 minutes per game, almost 36, 1.32 fantasy points per minute, and 33.42 usage rating. So loving the fantasy points per minute, loving the usage that I'm seeing from Dame Dalla. Now, moving ahead here and talking game total and spread, Denver 119, 6-point favorite at home. I can't give this a green. I got to probably put this in the orange, yellow to orange maybe. Portland 113, so you're talking about a 6-point spread. I do like the game totals here. 200 and, oh gosh, quick math. 32 points. Did I get that right? 232 points. combined here. So it hits the 230 or more mark for me. I'm loving the upside here for fantasy points, real life points, single stat, assist, single stat rebounds, single stat assists, single stat rebounds, and points. So all of that stuff is looking very good here. There's some upside, some fantasy potential for sure. Now we got to talk Nicola Yokic. 57 is his projection, and he's another guy who is just a monster on any given night. He'll be facing off against Enes Kanter. And anytime anyone who is as good as Nikola Yokic is facing off against Enes Kanter, well, my ears stand up. I get excited. Now, Yokic, he is projected for 58.76 fantasy points here on RotoGrinders, which is enough to put him over the 57 on PrizePicks. So maybe they're not high enough on this guy. If we go back to 5 games here, 57.2 against the Lakers, 63.7 against Boston, 57.9 against Washington, 57.4 against Cleveland, and just 41 against Atlanta. And that was 2 nights ago. So it's been pretty good, pretty consistent, reliable production for Nikola Yokic, going over in 1, 2, 3, 4 out of his last 5. So I'm liking his chances of going over here against Portland as well. Again, this matchup is looking just like a good one here on paper. Now, 37 minutes is his projection. This Portland Trailblazers team, they rank 13th in terms of how generous they are to versatile bigs. They're allowing just over 33 fantasy points per game. So the average fantasy points per game, not very high, but this is no average versatile big either. This is an above average versatile big in Nikola Yokic. So I'm loving the matchup against Enes Kanter. 2 games in 3 nights, playing almost 36 minutes per game, 1.57 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 29.69. So some of the best numbers for any center in the league. So just to recap this game, liking the totals here for both sides, liking the spread, but not loving the spread. I do wish that it was a little bit closer, as we could see from last night's game. Portland, not a very good team when you're missing CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, and so on. It's pretty much Damian Lillard and his sidekicks, Enes Kanter, Gary Trent. He needs some help. He needs all the help he can get. So I do question if they can hang around in this game and make it competitive. It's a little bit worrisome. Now, finally, we have reached the last game on the board, which is the Washington Wizards, who had an exciting game last night against the Lakers. Russell Westbrook was a guy who probably wasn't on everyone's list in terms of going over his fantasy projection last night of 45, but man, I just had a feeling that Russ was going to play well in LA, where he is from, and it worked out, man. That's all I could say is that the call worked. I called my shot and it worked out. Now he might sit tonight, so we're going to talk Bradley Beal in today's video. Bradley Beal's projected at 44. That number will go up if Russell Westbrook is truly rested on a back-to-back. He did play major minutes. He's no spring chicken anymore, and the man needs his rest, so maybe we don't see Russell Westbrook tonight. If that's the case, expect this projection of 46.53 for Beal to go up, but so far the over is looking like the way to go for Bradley Beal. Now, if we dig into his recent game logs, you could see he's been playing pretty good basketball. A lot of 50s in here. 5 games back against this Boston Celtics team, 50.9. That would be an over. 57.1 would be an over. I mean, these are sizable overs here versus 44. 41.8, he would have fallen short. 50.9 and then 54.4. So 4 out of the last 5 games, guys, he has went well over this mark of 44. This seems light. This seems like a steal. This seems like a bargain to me. But let's move on. And we go a little further here, and we can see if the over is really the way to go here on Bradley Beal. He's going to be playing 36 minutes according to RotoGrinders. He's a scoring wing. And the Clippers have done a good job against scoring wings, limiting them to under 21 fantasy points per game. So, yeah, this one could be difficult, especially if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are out there. I mean, those guys are just dogs on both sides of the basketball, offense and defense. So Beal could struggle here. Now, this is a back-to-back 3 games and 4 nights. As we mentioned, this Washington Wizards team, they did go into overtime versus the Lakers last night. So many minutes have been logged by Bradley Beal in the last 4 days. 35.6 minutes per game for the season, 1.37 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating is 36.6. So pretty high usage, pretty high fantasy points per minute. Some of the best numbers you're going to find for shooting guard or really any player in the entire league. So we have to look at the game totals and spread here. And this is why I am a bit pessimistic about Bradley Beal going over tonight. The Los Angeles Clippers, 121.75. That makes them 11.5 point favorites at home versus Washington. So this one has a red for me. In terms of spread, there is definite, absolute blowout potential. And the Vegas odds makers believe that it could get out of hand. And it probably will, guys. It probably will. Let's be honest, especially if Westbrook's out. Bradley Beal should only really probably be played in a first half over format. I would not play him in a full game format, especially if you plan on taking the over here. Yeah, so that's my feelings on that one. So let's talk about the next and last guy, Kawhi Leonard, who is projected at 51. That will conclude today's video. Now, he is projected at 46.11 over on RotoGrinders, which puts him under by a few points. Now, there's been a trend recently, and I can understand, once again, if you're feeling uncomfortable about doing it, but seems like PrizePicks has been very aggressive with some of these big names on the PrizePicks board. Kawhi Leonard being one, LeBron James being another one. Last night it was Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. It just seems like they've been overly aggressive, almost daring us to take the under on some of these superstars. Guys, we might just have to start taking some chances here and just risking it for the biscuit because, if they're going to continue to project these guys as aggressive as they have been, we got to grow some cojones, man, and take the under on some of these guys while the getting is good. Now, going back to the last 5 games here, against Sacramento, 33 would put them way under. Here's an over here by 57.1. That would put him over by a few points. 50.7 coming just short of the 51. Then he missed 3 games in a row. In his return to the lineup against Utah, 42 and then 50.1. So he's only went over 51 one time in the last 5 games. Not looking very good or promising tonight for Kawhi Leonard. So he's playing 35 minutes according to RotoGrinders. This Wizards team has allowed 32.6 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. Of course, this is no ordinary versatile forward. This is Kawhi Leonard, so I expect him to average a lot more than this 32.6 average that the Wizards are giving up. 2 games and 3 nights for the Claw, 34.8 minutes per game, almost at 35, 1.34 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 29.22. So good fantasy points per minute number, good usage rating for Kawhi Leonard. Guys, I'm not touching Kawhi Leonard over tonight. I think this is a situation where the projections here on RotoGrinders, they're pretty spot on. I would probably say that going under on Kawhi Leonard at 51 is probably the move and probably the way to go, as this game just has too much blowout risk for me to feel comfortable taking the over on a 51 fantasy projection. So there you have it. Final verdict. Stay away from these guys in full game formats unless you're feeling ballsy and you want to take the under on a guy like Kawhi Leonard. I get that play. I understand it. There is some risk to it, but that might be the way to go. Like I said, we might have to risk it for the biscuit. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. You let me know in the comments section. Who are you liking? Who are you hating? Is there somebody that I didn't talk about that you wish I would have and you're dying to know if you should go over or under on them? Leave their name down in the comments section below. Definitely check out the link to join the free Discord chat. I'll make sure that the link is updated. I don't know why it keeps expiring. I keep getting messages from you guys, comments saying that the Discord link is expired. It's not working. I can't get in. I'm going to have to reach out to Discord and figure out why these links keep expiring. Trust me, I go in there, I tell it to never expire. I tell it to have unlimited uses, and somehow the links continue to expire. So it's a conundrum that I'll have to figure out. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me. CJ for Out of Bounds DFS. And until the next video, guys, good luck to you tonight. Let's try to win some money. Peace out. We're out of here.